when I was invited, our team was talking about digital pedagogy and do we have anything to say about that? And in the end I said, okay, I'll suggest something to Elton, and if he's happy with that, we'll do it, and then you have to decide whether it fits in with digital pedagogy or not. I work with a small team called the Education Enhancement Team, part of the academic IT services at Oxford, and we do a lot of work on outreach, creating and using digital collections. So I'm going to talk a little bit about part of what we do, and I've brought some leaflets and things that you're welcome to pick up afterwards. Before I talk so much about us, I want to talk about someone else. This is Mostyn Williams. Familiar to anyone? I'd be very surprised if someone knew about him. But about 99 years and 9 months and 3 days ago, he joined the British Army. And if you think back, you realise that's about 1 month after the outbreak of the First World War. And he trained in the UK to become road builder and support man. And after about a year, he was sent overseas. And he wrote a diary during his time. Almost every day he posted a small, almost like a tweet. Sorry, I don't know if you can read that, but first post that we have is the 3rd of September 1915. In army, 1 year, preparing kit for departure. He was sent to France and had a fairly quiet time there, building roads and so on. So October 1st, quiet all day, listening post at night, very cold. 2nd of October, quiet, got a few shrapnel over, no damage. In night saw aeroplane being shelled, 3 searchlights. So quite, it's not sort of fighting in the trenches, it's not storming over going over the top or anything like that. In November, he and his company were sent to the Balkan front, where his life was pretty much the same, according to his diary anyway, as it was in France. So in December, he said, slept well, considering, out road making again. Started out trenches in which British will make their stand, rode home. Worked on mule track. As you see, it's quite fairly mundane tasks. And he goes on like that, almost every day a small post. January, thawing first butter for 2 months. Wonderful moonlight effect on snow, so he's quite artistic. He spends the rest of the war, or until he's injured, at the Balkan front, and his life actually does change, and there's a lot more engagement and a lot more. He sees a lot more of what we would expect for someone at war. So things like in June 1917, so you imagine it's been there a while now. Enemy plane over at dawn, flying very low and firing a machine gun into our camps. 4 killed, 10 wounded. Cold shower at RMC bathhouse, getting quite clean. So this mixture of something quite horrendous, like 4 people being killed, and then going for a shower. This is one of many diaries that have been submitted to a collection that we're running. We know about Mostyn because his relatives actually took the effort of typing up his diary and submitting it to our project. The project is called Europeana. They uploaded it on the website, like that. And it's one of hundreds of similar diaries. Some are much more elaborate, much longer, more detailed. Some are shorter. They cover different aspects of the war and from different countries. This is an international project. I'll talk a little bit more about it later on, but I just wanted to show this first to talk about the kind of material that we find in our community collections. Community collection is, as far as I know, not clearly defined anyway. We call a collection that's been created by a community, where the community has shared their knowledge or their resources. That's a community collection. This community could be a small group or it could be a large group, like everyone in the world for a big international project, or everyone in the sewing bee in our village. So, the first community collection that we ran was the Great War Archive. I don't know if you may have heard about that. It was in 2008. It was part of a larger project that was digitising poetry manuscripts. And the project wanted to also collect some ephemera or some other general material from the same period, which was the First World War. So what the team did, like an experiment, like a pilot, is that they set up a website, invited the general public to submit their stories and upload digital images of any material that they held to that website, and created a collection through that. I don't know if you noticed, but if you put up a website and ask people to contribute, they don't necessarily immediately find it. You need to reach out to people, and there are different ways you can do that, there are different ways you can engage with the relevant community. The Great War Archive decided that one approach was to put on events, collection events, or open days, some call them roadshows, which was basically an event where the team brought a portable digitisation studio to a venue, invited people to bring the material there, come and talk to some subject experts and get the material digitised. The project team would then upload the material onto the website. This was, in one way, an attempt to get attention drawn to the public, to the project. This was picked up by local press and media, and we got a lot of help that way. So we actually got more contributions online through running these events because the events were publicised. But we also found that this was a very good way of actually engaging with the people who held this material. They would be very happy to share, and coming and sharing it in person was important. Also, a large part of the community, the people who actually came to these events, were quite, should we say, mature and may not be able to do things online. They didn't have computers, so they didn't have internet, and were frightened of things like digital images, or actually having to do them. So doing these kinds of events did not only draw attention to the project, but it was also a way of helping and being able to engage with people who would not be able to use the online portal. We've called this model, where you combine an online and more face-to-face engagement model, the Oxford Community Collection model, very innovative. So using crowdsourcing online and face-to-face engagement to marry the two. This model, especially relating to the First World War, but also to other topics, has been picked up by others and used. For example, by the Europeana project that I talked about or mentioned earlier on. Europeana is a big European organisation, and they collaborate with museums and archives and have a portal of material freely available for anyone in the world to use online. But they also wanted to collect some material from individuals, from people themselves. So they ran events, about 150 now, over the last 3 years, in lots of countries. Not so many in the UK yet, but over 100 in France and 20 odd in Germany and so on. This model where the project goes out into the community, meet people and collect material. And assuming this works, I'd like to share, this is always the exciting bit, isn't it, the live bit, see if I can introduce you to one of my colleagues who can talk about this.
I think we're reaching a very critical point about how the First World War is viewed. The most obvious thing is 2014, the 100th anniversary of the outbreak of the war. But we've also just passed, a couple of years ago, the death of the last surviving veteran from the war who actually fought out on the Western Front. So I think it's quite a dangerous period that the war may pass out of sort of ownership by the people, so that memories, artifacts, items, diaries, photographs, etc. may start to get thrown away. The Europeana project is mainly trying to collect material from the public across Europe that they've held related to the First World War. Their family mementos or something like that, which have stayed in their attics or their drawers and so on. So it's to reveal that and then make that freely available online to researchers, lecturers, teachers, students and so on. People, when they bring in material to one of these roadshows, they can't quite understand why someone from Oxford University would be interested in the story of their grandfather or great-grandfather and so on. But when we explain to them that this really is a unique historical record, it may just be a photograph, but it may be a diary, it may be a set of letters, which, who knows, may contain information which we never knew about. I think they understand then the importance of it. And also what we found is that the public have an astounding awareness of the war and quite an in-depth knowledge of real intricacies, historical, material, military information and so on, which we can tap into. I think someone once said that it exposes the extraordinary about the ordinary person, and it also exposes the ordinary about the extraordinary people. So a famous object which we often talk about was a postcard that was brought in when we were in Munich and this actually made the national press. Because as it stands, it was just a postcard from a German soldier to his friend, written in 1917, a picture of Nuremberg on the front, a scribble on the back saying he's going to go to the front soon, he's just been to the dentist. Nothing really spectacular. What made it extraordinary was it was a postcard from Adolf Hitler to his colleague, and suddenly holding that item was a quite emotional experience for all kinds of reasons. It's not like going into a museum where you see an artifact. You might see the same artifact, but suddenly you're seeing what was the story behind this, who collected this, how did it get passed on. What I'm seeing here is the effect on the wife, the daughter, the son, the child, the soldier who went out and spent most of their time being thoroughly bored, but then went out and saw some things which we can only imagine.
Lots of points there that we could return to. Let's see if I can find. I'd like to share some of the objects that we have collected with you and just point some of the stories out to some of the areas where I think we can see engagement on a slightly different level than what we normally perhaps do in academia. Or not. I don't know if you recognise the big picture behind the scene, behind the objects, the black and white one. It's quite a famous one. Jim should recognise it. It is in the Imperial War Museum. It's an official photograph of happy British troops after a night ride on the Somme, I think. And it is in the Imperial War Museum. It's an official photograph. We have war diaries official war diaries from the regiment and from the officers serving in this group. But for the Great War Archive, the first community collection, we also have this picture actually shared through that community collection by the relatives of this man here, who was private. So he had the photograph, and he also had told his family about how the photograph was taken, what happened, how did it come to be taken. And we also have his diary, not from this particular date to be sure, but from a period just before that. So we can then connect the official history and things you might see in a museum with the personal history. Down here is a pre-printed injury card that injured soldiers could just cross over or tick some boxes and send home to say, I've been injured, but it's all well, I'll write soon. And this particular one was part of a collection submitted by Charlie Carr's relatives. He was from a village, or a small town in the UK, where they researched the war memorial, the local war memorial, and they found information about all the people except one person. So the people doing this research went online and then managed to come across this particular submission in the Great War Archive, and through that could get in touch with the family of this missing person, the person they didn't know anything about because the family had left the village. And the family could then provide more information for the village, and also attended a big event that they held there and wrote to the archive and said that they were so grateful for us allowing this to happen. Of course, it wasn't us, it was them having shared it. But since they had taken part in this project and shared their material, they actually managed to also engage with people on that level. The second one, diary, one of many diaries, handwritten. This one is actually from Gallipoli. I don't know how well you know your First World War history, but it's by a stretcher bearer who was at Gallipoli. So it's a slightly unusual aspect because it's not from a fighting soldier or officer, but it's someone who's taking care of the wounded. And he describes what it was like there. It was quite harrowing, actually. And I say stretcher bearer, which also brings me on to another item which isn't featured there. Someone shared his dad's poems that his dad wrote in the trenches. His dad wasn't a famous poet or anything like that, but he wrote some poetry anyway, and the son shared it through the Great War Archive. Our team worked with an organisation called Poetry by Heart, who worked with schools to recite poetry. And we put together a small collection of poetry from the First World War that included a poem by from this community collection called The Stretcher Bearer. And that, completely unknown to us, was the one that was picked up most by all the students. So it actually featured in very many of the regional competitions and also in the final. And the woman, or the young girl who won, performed it also. So that's been picked up by students and really seemed to resonate with them. And I've heard rumours, I don't know if it's true, that it might actually be added to the national curriculum. So it will be required reading. The BBC also picked it up separately and have made a small 2-minute feature film where different people read this particular poem that they then broadcast on their touring shows, the road shows, and it might also be online. So it's bringing together things from the community collection into other parts of the world, which I think is engagement. And I could tell you a lot more about all the objects, but I think we can save that for the coffee break. I talked about the model, how it's an online crowdsourced collection, but also with some personal engagement. This could be used in different ways, and an organisation that we work with called Age Exchange, they are working with reminiscence groups, so working on primarily with older people, possibly with some problems with memories, but also with intergenerational workshops related to memories. And they talk about how objects actually lead to reinterpretation. So having access to an object may help you reinterpret your history. They use their stories that they collect and the objects that they look at during their sessions for their work, for example, creating theatre plays out of it or exhibitions. But they're now also sharing the material that they collect related to the First World War through the Europeana platform. So they're using their community engagement as a starting point, and then the online is an add-on, which will allow them to interact and engage with other people that they wouldn't normally reach. But it's not the starting point. So it's turning the model the other way around. They work with various communities, often going in and doing quite intense workshops or collection events where they talk to people for maybe more than an hour or two, and also build a very strong relationship with these people. This is just one example at one of their events, which was organised by the Jewish Military Museum. Some of the gentlemen who came and shared their family stories, which were quite interesting, coming from Germany, with the project. They found it so rewarding that they said they wanted to be part of the project, and they actually became volunteers and go out into schools and tell the stories about their fathers to groups of students. And I'm not saying that these people are those students, but also working with groups of students who have perhaps had some performance issues and at risk of being excluded, more or less. Working with the students and getting them to engage with the stories, and even doing presentations to the whole schools, talking about issues that come up through these stories that are 100 years old, that have been collected through the project, but actually managing to engage young boys and girls of today. So I think that's showing how powerful this combination of digital and face-to-face can be. The face-to-face doesn't always have to be interaction on a face-to-face, or the interaction can be done on different levels. World Hoard is another project working with Anglo-Saxon teaching material. So it's a slightly different community than anyone who has anything from the First World War. This is a community that is quite lively online and that uses lots of online media to communicate and exchange ideas. The project set out to collect material that teachers could use with an open license. And they didn't do roadshow events or didn't invite people to come to an event, but what they did instead was targeted support. So, for example, a teacher who might have a set of handouts, but they went digital, could get help with turning those into digital versions of it. I know that the Ashmolean Museum had some photographs that they had grouped into sets. The project then took those sets that are in the project website, but also divided the sets into individual objects, so all of those have individual metadata which make them more easy to find. So it's engagement on a different level, but it's actually, the focus of it is to target people where they are, to know your community and use the interaction model that actually works with that particular community, be they the providers or the receivers of the material. It doesn't all have to be history. I'm just going to quickly mention that Merton College is 750 years this year, and they're creating a time capsule, collecting impressions and material from life at the college today. So it doesn't have to be always history going back that is involved. The model that we talk about can be symbolised something like this. You have idea, apparently the Latin name for that is idea, and community. You need an IT solution of some kind, and contrary to what some people would think, you do need staff and resources. You may not need as much staff or as many monies as you might have if you were to digitize all this material yourself, but you do need to have resources to put into it. I'm very happy to talk more about this and how you can work with this model if you'd be interested in that. I won't go through it now, but I'll just say that if you're interested in learning more, come and talk to me. I've got my card here. I've also got a little postcard for our group. If you go to the URL on this postcard, you will find a lot of support material that we've put up online. So help on how to run a community collection. I also have some other leaflets about the Europeana collection, which is First World War collection, the big one. And also I thought when Graham was talking about, or no, it was Elton, wasn't it, talking about using Google Earth, a project that we've used some of the material from our community collections to create a resource or an archive of open educational resources. So material that educators or students for that matter can use without having to worry about the license. It is a license that will allow educational use, Creative Commons. The project is called World War I Centenary Continuations and Beginnings, where new material is taken into blog posts, for example, short articles that can be used, but also some Google Earth applications. For example, where you can look at different terrains. Not all the fighting in the First World War took part in the trenches. It wasn't only mud. There were also desert fights, and there were sea battles, and there were fights in the mountains and so on. So you can get an overlay on Google Earth with clicking on a particular region. You'll see pictures from the European archive illustrating that particular feature. So more of that in there. If anyone has any questions or want to talk about this, I'm more than happy to talk to you. But I think my time's up.
That's it. Thank you very much.